of you have not heard my safety call before, if there is an alarm that sounds at any time, pretend you're back in elementary school, hold hands, walk, don't run to the nearest exit. The world's largest fire extinguisher is out there. If, on the other hand, the chairs start moving across the room and the walls begin to shake a little bit, it's not hangovers from last night's party. It could be an earthquake. We get them in Southern California all the time. Most of the time, nothing serious happens as a result of them. However, we are overdue for the big one. So, if that should happen, shelter in place. Stay away from the doors. Careful of what's overhead. If you can, I'll be under this table. If you can find space, crawl under the table until the shaking stops. We'll be instructed what to do. But other than that, the only fireworks should be in this room. You've been invited back by the company or the organization to follow up to your first visit. They've asked you to speak only about the ethics part of your presentation and to explain why your solution successfully addresses all of the issues involved. You'll have 10 minutes. I'm the timekeeper. I'll let you know when there's about 2 minutes to go. No Q&A, no slides, no video. It's just you and a couple of members of your team. So we will get started now. And according to my schedule, Ripon, you're number one. Tell me when you're ready, and we'll go. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we would just like to thank the Board of Directors for inviting us back to talk about the facial recognition technology that we discussed yesterday. As we showed yesterday, it's clearly financially and legally viable, but you've asked us back to discuss the ethicality of using facial recognition technology in a company such as KFC, Taco Bell, or Pizza Hut. Now, in order to get at this root of the question of, is facial recognition technology ethical, we're going to ask a series of questions among ourselves to pose these hypotheticals to work through this issue. And I'll start with the first of these questions, which is just quite simply, is technology inherently ethical or unethical? Does a technological advancement carry within itself any ethicality? To which our team would answer, no. Any technological advancement, whether it's the development of a book, a radio, a television, or even something as simple as fertilizer, carries no inherent ethicality. It's how you use it. And to illustrate this, I'll use a historical analogy. At the turn of the 20th century, a man by the name of Fritz Hopper was one of the scientists that was trying to figure out how to make fertilizer in order to feed the world. At that point, the population was growing to the point that the soil didn't have enough nitrogen to grow the food that the world needed to survive. Hundreds of millions were scheduled to die of famine and starvation within the course of several decades. Fritz Hopper figured out how to synthesize ammonium and use it as a fertilizer to grow food. Since then, it has saved hundreds of millions, if not billions of lives, and half of the global food supply comes from this one invention. That same man, using the exact same technology 30 years later, participated in the First World War and started using it as chemical gas, a weapon of terror that killed thousands of people. It's the exact same technology. It's the same ammonium, the same scientific process. It's merely the application of that technology that lent it its ethicality. Growing food was ethical, killing people with poison gas was not. The technology itself had no inherent ethical or unethical things. It was merely how it was used. So when we answer this first question of, is technology in itself ethical? The answer is no. It's merely how it's used. Beyond even that, though, we move to the question of, is data collection in itself ethical or unethical? And we'd answer the same way, that unless it's used in an ethical or unethical way, the mere act of collecting data points, of writing books, is neither ethical or unethical. It merely is. So that's the way that we'll answer these first sets of questions.
Which leads us to the second question, is can the methods of data collection ever be ethical? And again, the answer is, it depends. We look at, for example, of surveillance videos and cameras that we see around on the streets and everywhere we go. Well, we have this universal idea that they're there for our safety and that method can be good. It's very easy for that information and that data collected to skew bad and be used against us. So again, it comes down to how it's being used. Now, when we look more specifically at what we've discussed yesterday with facial recognition software being put into fast food restaurants, more specifically KFC, we see the method is going to be important. And to determine the method, we have to look at, and the way we measure this method is based off what the customer expectation is. We see that when we go into a fast food restaurant, customers have a certain expectation of what's going to happen, and that being that they will have good customer service. We find that because of this, facial recognition software is the method used is inherently ethical because we're meeting that customer service expectation. Now, you may be asking furthermore, when does this become unethical methods? Well, we find that if a customer were to come in and you were to collect their facial geometry and then maybe sell this information, not communicating this effectively, that's when the method becomes unethical. So what we see is it's this case-by-case basis, and what we determine it is based off what that customer expectation is.
The last question we really want to ask is biometric data inherently different than any other sort of data? And biometric data is, of course, the things that physically can identify you as you. So your retina scans, your fingerprints, your DNA, the inside of your earlobes, and your face. Is this inherently different than any other data point that could identify you as you? And the answer is yes and no, because I don't think any reasonable person would stand up and say, yeah, your social security number, which is inherently tied to you and can identify you, is the same as your face, which is also tied to you and can identify you. One's a number, the other is your face. That's simply how it goes. However, they do function in much the same way when it comes to technology. They're both these identifiers that link some aspect of data to you. For example, if I'm going to go up and talk to Wyatt, Wyatt has my face as connected to me. He can recognize me from my face, from the data point that he knows. In the same way that the IRS can see my social security number on my tax form and know that that's me. So in this way, we see that the data points are really functioning the same. And in this way, it's not unethical to ask for a different data point to identify you by. And in this way, facial recognition technology really doesn't fundamentally differ from, say, collecting your credit card number to get payment as a transaction. This is just another way to identify you as a business, as a repeat customer, in order to have whatever machinations you will to make your business run better to meet the expectations. Where it becomes unethical is where you stop allowing people to have control of their own information, to stop allowing people to say whether or not, yes, I want to release my social security number to this university so that they can have this different information. I want to stop releasing my face to my friends because I don't want to interact with them anymore. And in that same way, as long as we use an opt-out system in KFC, where you can go in and order and get your food and then say, no, I don't want to give you my facial recognition data, don't save that, delete it, put it in the ether, don't do anything else with it, that's all right, because you're allowing them to still have control over their own forms of identity. The only reason we're so uncomfortable with this facial recognition technology right now is it's not really a normal way of identifying yourself to a business. You have these different social spheres where you use different pieces of data to identify you. So going back to the previous example, I sure hope Wyatt knows my face. He's my best friend. So he really should know that about me and be able to identify me by that. But I really hope he doesn't know my social security number, because that'd be weird. In the same way, I hope the IRS agent that did my taxes this year knows my social security number so he can identify me legally and in the system. But I really hope he doesn't know my face, because I don't really want to talk to the IRS face to face. So in this way, we see that KFC is kind of breaching that social sphere, which is uncomfortable. It would be the same as that IRS agent coming and meeting me face to face so that he can audit me. But it is not unethical to do so, to ask for a different piece of information to identify you with. It's all in how you use it.
Which brings us to the solution, to wrap everything up that we've been saying. So as Delu touched on earlier, we need to allow for an opt-out system. So if we're going to collect this information, having another form of verification of who you are as a person, we have to allow our customers to opt out, meaning that they can choose not to have this information stored any longer with KFC. We also have to make sure that we're properly educating them and letting them know what is happening. We think we can do this through signs on the doors when they enter KFC, a brochure at the register that explains what facial recognition software is. And we think ultimately this is allowing for that ethicality of collecting this information. We see that through this, the method remains ethical. But furthermore, you may be asking, doesn't this put a lot of responsibility onto the customer? And we see that this isn't any different than how current transactions work. We don't think the responsibility becomes more if we use facial recognition software, because it's the same level of responsibility of giving your credit card information as giving your facial data. So we don't see that as being a burden upon our customer. And we also, furthermore, don't see this as being an issue of privacy rights or of privacy protection, because we allow for this opt-out system. And we think this is the best way to make sure that the technological methods remain ethical.
So to conclude, we're using a brand new piece of technology right here that's in uncharted waters, and it feels weird to use your face to recognize something or order something at a restaurant because it's new. But all throughout history, what we can see is that people use new technology and it's always uncomfortable. When the radio first started, people were uncomfortable using it. That's what we're proposing with facial recognition software, and that's why we're arguing that it has no inherent ethicality. It's merely how we use it, and we want to use it in the most ethical way possible for young brands. Thank you.
Thank you very much.